I opened the package with trembling fingers, expecting something that would make me feel remembered. What I found was a box of store-bought cookies, half crushed, with a pre-printed card that didn't even have my name on it. The cookies sat on my counter for 2 days. I stared at them each time I brewed my tea, as if they might suddenly speak for themselves. They didn't. They were as quiet and cold as the silence from my son, Jack. I hadn't seen him in 6 months, not since Christmas. And now, for my 74th birthday, this was all he could muster. I wasn't bitter, not yet, but something inside me felt hollow, like the kind of emptiness that doesn't echo, only hums softly at the edges of your thoughts. I'm not the kind to expect grand gestures, but I raised that boy with every ounce of myself. After my husband died, I gave up the only job I had just to make sure Jack could finish college without worry. He got his MBA, got married, moved across the country, and now, apparently, forgot how to call. On the 3rd day, I carried the cookies to the retirement potluck. It wasn't much, just a few of us who shared the tiny apartment complex on Evergreen Street. Mostly women, mostly quiet. Everyone brought something. Edna brought her deviled eggs. Gloria made her molasses pie. But it wasn't until Doris, the new woman barely 60, hair like spun silver and eyes like judgment, picked one up and said, "These taste cheap," that something snapped inside me. I laughed. It surprised even me. "You know what?" I said, a little louder than I meant to. "My son sent those to me. For my birthday. No card, no call. Just this sad little box." Everyone froze. We didn't talk about things like that. Not out loud. But I didn't care anymore. Doris smirked. "Sounds like my daughter-in-law. She sent me a candle last year. Lavender. I'm allergic." I chuckled again. Jack married a woman named Claire. Her mother's this regal type. Wears pearls to the grocery store. Claire treats her like a queen. Me? I'm the charity case they call at Christmas and forget by New Year's. Gloria poured more tea. "Why don't you give the cookies to her?" The other mother. It was a joke. A throwaway line. But it stuck in my ribs like a splinter. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I did it. I repacked the cookies, still mostly intact. I wrote a short note. "These seem more your taste. Enjoy. Martha." No anger. No sarcasm. Just the truth, delivered plainly. Claire's mother, Lillian, lived just 30 minutes away. I had her address from the wedding invite still pinned inside my drawer. I took the early bus, wearing my Sunday dress, and hand-delivered the box to her doorstep. She wasn't expecting me. Her eyes widened in surprise as she opened the door. "Martha," she said, voice like polished silver. "What a surprise." I held out the box. "Jack sent me these for my birthday. I thought maybe you'd like them. I know you're important to them." She looked at the box, then at me. "You came all the way here to give me cookies?" "I came to remind myself I still have choices," I said, "even if they're small." And with that, I turned and walked away. I didn't expect a response. I wasn't even sure why I did it. Maybe it was petty. Maybe it was brave. All I know is, the ache in my chest loosened that day, just a little. 2 weeks later, the phone rang. It was Claire. "Hi, Martha," she said, voice soft, unsure. "I hope it's okay I'm calling." "Of course. I wanted to talk to you about the cookies." I waited. The silence buzzed on the line. "My mother got them." She was confused. I imagined she was. "She said you seemed sad." And I realized, we haven't been good to you. It was the closest I'd heard her come to an apology. "Claire, I didn't send them to make a scene." "I know, but it made us think. Jack especially." "Did it?" I asked, not cruel, just tired. "He cried," she said quietly, "when he realized how it looked, how it felt. He thought he was doing enough. But I think he's been hiding behind busy schedules." I didn't answer right away. Then she said, "We'd like to come see you. This weekend, if you're free." It wasn't fireworks or flowers, but it was something real. And that meant more than 100 boxes of cookies. That Saturday, they arrived. Jack looked older than I remembered, and more afraid. He brought me flowers. Real ones. Wrapped in newspaper, not plastic. And when he hugged me, he didn't let go quickly. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered into my shoulder. "I've been so caught up in everything. I forgot who got me here." I didn't cry. Not then. But when Claire handed me a fresh, warm batch of homemade oatmeal cookies, with raisins and love baked right, I felt something melt inside me. We sat for hours, talking, remembering, laughing. Jack fixed the screen door. Claire asked about the recipes I used to make. And when they left, they didn't just promise to call. They promised to return. Later that night, I sat at my little kitchen table, holding a single cookie in my hand. I thought about how something so small, something overlooked and easily dismissed, had become the bridge back to my son. Sometimes it isn't the big gestures that change a life. Sometimes it's a box of broken cookies delivered with intention. And the courage to say, I matter too. The following week passed more quietly than I expected. After Jack and Claire visited, there was a warmth in the house I hadn't felt in years. It lingered in the cushions they'd sat on, in the faint smell of Claire's vanilla lotion, and in the memory of Jack's awkward but heartfelt hug. I found myself humming as I folded laundry, something I hadn't done since before Arthur died. But peace has a funny way of inviting the past back in. The phone rang again. I expected it to be Jack, maybe calling to say they'd made it home safe. But it wasn't. It was Lillian. Her voice was calm, measured. Martha, I was wondering if you might be willing to have tea with me. There's something I'd like to discuss. I blinked, unsure I'd heard right. Tea? At my home. Tomorrow, if you're free. I hesitated. The woman had always intimidated me. At the wedding, she barely acknowledged me standing tall in her champagne-colored suit, sipping Chardonnay like royalty while I held onto my purse and smiled too much. But something in her tone this time felt different. All right, I said finally. 3 o'clock. Perfect. The next day, I wore the same dress I'd worn when I brought her the cookies. It felt symbolic, though I didn't know of what. When I arrived, Lillian greeted me at the door wearing a simple blouse and slacks, no pearls in sight. Her hair was tied back, soft lines around her mouth suggesting she hadn't slept much. She led me into the sunroom, where 2 cups of tea waited on a small table near a potted fern. The air smelled of jasmine. I was surprised, she began, pouring honey into her cup, by your visit. Not displeased. Just surprised. I didn't mean to intrude, I said carefully. You didn't, she replied. Actually, it made me think. I took a sip of my tea. It was hot and fragrant, with a sweetness that filled the nose. Lillian looked at me squarely. Do you know what it's like to be constantly revered? The question startled me. Revered? She nodded. Claire puts me on a pedestal. Always has. When her father died, I became both parents. I leaned into the role. I like being needed. But now, she doesn't see me as a person, just as an ideal. I wasn't sure where she was going. But when you came to my door, she continued, with that little box and those sad cookies, I realized something. Claire had never sent me cookies, not even the store-bought kind. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Lillian looked away, almost shyly. I wanted to feel smug at first. I thought, oh, she's bitter. She's jealous. But then I thought maybe Martha just wants to be acknowledged. Not worshipped. Not pitted. Just remembered. I felt a lump form in my throat. She smiled faintly. Claire and Jack, they've been absorbed in their own world. I tried to tell them once, but it always came off wrong. They're good people, Martha. But they don't know how to love 2 mothers at the same time. I chuckled softly. Neither did I at their age. We talked for nearly 2 hours. About aging. About loneliness. About how invisible you begin to feel once your hair turns white and your children stop calling without a reason. Before I left, Lillian touched my hand gently. Thank you, she said, for the cookies and for showing up. On the bus ride home, I felt something shift. I'd always painted Lillian as the villain, the polished, superior matriarch who took my son away. But perhaps we were both just mothers on different sides of the same ache. That Sunday, Jack called again. Twice in 1 week. It was beginning to feel like a miracle. Mom, he said brightly, we're thinking of coming back next month. Maybe spend a weekend. Claire wants to learn that cinnamon roll recipe you used to make. My eyes stung. I'd love that. Oh, and one more thing, Claire told me you and her mom had tea. We did. He was quiet for a second. She said it was good. It was, I said, surprisingly. Well, I'm glad. I think she needed that. Maybe I did too. As we talked, I looked out the window. The sky was pink with dusk. For the first time in a long while, I felt connected not just to Jack, but to the strange little family he'd created. Maybe I didn't need to fight for a place in it. Maybe I just had to show up in my own way. But not everything was fixed. That following Wednesday, I bumped into my neighbor Edna in the hallway. She was carrying groceries and muttering under her breath. Need help? I asked, taking 2 of her bags. She grunted. These arms aren't what they used to be. I walked with her to her apartment. You hear about Doris? She asked as we stepped inside. No. What happened? She slipped in her shower. Broke her wrist. No family came. I felt a sting of guilt. Doris and I hadn't exactly become friends, but we shared the same hallway, the same potlucks, the same sense of being forgotten. I should check on her, I murmured. You should. I did. Doris was cranky as ever, sitting in her recliner with her arm in a cast and a blanket over her legs. What are you doing here? She barked. Bringing you soup, I said, and a listening ear. She eyed the container warily. Homemade. Better. From Edna's freezer. She smirked, then sighed. I didn't think anyone would come. Well, I did. Don't make me regret it. That was the beginning of something odd and wonderful. Doris softened. Or maybe I just stopped expecting her to be someone else. Either way, we began to share stories, watch old movies together, and laugh about things that didn't matter. Jack called again the next week. This time, Claire was on the line too. Mom, he said, we want to do a joint birthday celebration. Yours and Claire's mom's. At our place. We'll fly you out. I blinked. You're sure? We're sure, Claire chimed in. You matter, Martha. And I want you there. For real. I accepted. Not because I needed the party, but because it felt like the next step in something healing. Something real. That night, I sat down and wrote a letter. Not an email. A real letter. For Jack and Claire. Telling them about my life before them. About their father. About what it meant to raise a son alone. I didn't know if I'd ever send it. But writing it made me feel visible. And sometimes, that's enough. The flight was early, and I hadn't been on a plane in over 10 years. The airport was loud, sterile, filled with people who moved too fast and never made eye contact. I clutched my small suitcase like a lifeline, feeling both ancient and invisible in the tide of younger, busier lives. When I arrived at Jack and Claire's house, the front door opened before I had a chance to knock. Mom, Jack said, his voice bright, genuine. He pulled me into a hug longer this time, firmer, and I sank into it, letting myself believe this was real. Claire followed, holding a bundle of flowers and wearing a wide, almost nervous smile. We're so glad you're here. Their home was larger than I expected. Modern, polished, but not cold. Photographs lined the hallway, mostly of the two of them, a few with Lillian, and now, finally, one with me, taken from our last visit, framed and hung near the stairs. You hungry? Claire asked. I made those cinnamon rolls. From your recipe. I smiled. That's bold. They might be a disaster, she said, laughing. They might be perfect, I offered. We sat in their dining room, sunlight streaming in from tall windows. I watched as Jack poured coffee, as Claire handed me a plate like I belonged there. And for the first time in a long while, I did. Lillian's coming over later, Claire said carefully. She wants to do dinner with all of us. Wonderful, I said. And I meant it. The hours passed with a comfortable rhythm. Jack asked about old family stories. Claire asked about Arthur. I told them about his stubbornness, his terrible dance moves, the way he used to sneak cookies into Jack's lunchbox even when I said no. Jack laughed hard, eyes misty. I forgot about that. I never did, I said softly. Later that afternoon, Lillian arrived. She looked almost casual, hair pulled back, soft cardigan, a bottle of wine in hand. She greeted me with a warm nod. Martha, she said, thank you for coming. I nodded back. Thank you for inviting me. The dinner was lovely. Roast chicken, vegetables, fresh bread. Claire lit candles and set the table like a magazine spread. But the most beautiful thing was the conversation. It wasn't perfect. There were pauses, old habits. But no tension, no masks. Just four people, different, flawed, finally meeting one another in truth. After dessert, those cinnamon rolls, surprisingly delicious. Jack stood, cleared his throat, and tapped his glass gently with a spoon. There's something Claire and I wanted to share, he said. He reached into his pocket, unfolded a small paper, and looked at me. We're expecting. The room froze. Claire's eyes shimmered. We wanted to wait until we saw you in person. You're going to be a grandmother. The air left my lungs. And then it returned, all at once. I stood, moved toward them, and wrapped my arms around them both. My son, his wife, the child I once carried, now carrying another. I don't know what to say, I whispered. Jack smiled. Say you'll be part of this. I already am, I said, voice breaking. That night, Lillian and I sat on the back patio while the younger couple cleaned up inside. She handed me a glass of tea. You're going to be an incredible grandmother, she said. I smiled. We both are. She nodded. Maybe we can try something new. Share the space. Support them together. I looked out at the stars. I'd like that. Lillian sipped her tea. They're lucky to have us. Not as lucky as we are, I replied. She tilted her head. To get a second chance, I clarified. To rewrite the ending. We sat in silence for a moment. Not the heavy kind. The soft kind that follows understanding. Over the next few days, I stayed with them. Claire asked for help setting up the nursery. Jack brought down old photo albums, and we laughed at hairstyles we should have left in the past. Every morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and voices in the kitchen. Not always addressed to me, but welcoming me nonetheless. And yet, even in that joy, an old fear crept in. The fear of it fading, of returning home, of becoming distant again. On my last morning there, I found a small envelope on my nightstand. My name written in Claire's tidy script. Inside was a letter. Dear Martha, thank you for showing me what strength looks like. I've been so focused on being the perfect wife, the perfect daughter, I forgot to be a good human. You reminded me that kindness isn't performance eats consistency. You are more than Jack's mother. You're part of this family now. Fully. Always. Love. Claire. I read it 3 times. The 3rd time, the tears came. At the airport, they all came to see me off. Lillian too. Jack hugged me tightly. You'll come back before the baby? I laughed. I'll come back for the baby, after the baby, during the baby I'll never stop. Claire pressed a small box into my hand. Cookies, she said with a grin. Made by me. With love. Not from a store. I smiled. Then they'll taste like home. The plane took off as the city shrank below me. I thought about the journey, how a box of disappointing cookies had led me here. To reconciliation. To rebirth. Sometimes, life doesn't hand you what you wanted. Sometimes it hands you what you didn't even know you needed. A spark. A crack in the silence. A reminder that it's never too late to matter. When I returned home, my small apartment felt different. Not empty. Just waiting. I set the new box of cookies on the counter, beside a photo of Jack as a toddler, and a blank space beside iTone I would fill soon. That night, I called Doris. You feel like watching something? I asked. What, like a movie? Yeah, I said. I have some cinnamon cookies and too much tea for one person. There was a pause, then a reluctant chuckle. All right, Martha, but I get to pick the movie. I smiled. Fair enough. And so it went. From broken cookies to broken hearts, to healing one piece at a time. And maybe, just maybe, that's the best kind of story after all. A week after returning home, I received a package. It was small, wrapped in brown craft paper and tied with twine. No name on the front, just my address, written in that familiar tidy script. I opened it slowly, unsure what to expect. Inside was a leather-bound journal and a note. You said you used to write. Thought you might want to start again. Love, Claire. I ran my hand over the journal's cover. The leather was soft, worn in that beautiful way that says, I'm made to be held. Beneath the note, nestled between the pages, was a single Polaroid of Jack, Claire, and Lillian. In the middle, Claire held her growing belly. Someone must have taken it the day I left. I smiled. For years, I'd stopped writing. After Arthur died, my words felt dried up, like they had nothing left to say. But now, they returned, one by one, like brave little birds finding their way home. I started writing that night. Not about the past, not yet. I wrote about now. About the softness of forgiveness, the beauty of small gestures, the power of being seen. Days turned into weeks, and each one felt a little fuller than the last. Doris, despite her grumbles, had begun to stop by unannounced. She'd knock twice, mutter something about wasting time alone, and settle on my couch with a bowl of popcorn and whatever movie we agreed on, though she always found a reason to complain about the ending. One Thursday evening, while we watched an old Jimmy Stewart film, she turned to me and said, You think it's too late to patch things up with my daughter? The question surprised me. Doris never talked about her family. Never too late, I said. Just maybe. Later than we'd like. She nodded slowly, her eyes glassy. You know, she said, you're not half bad company, Martha. Don't go soft on me now. We both laughed. That night, I thought about how many of USODER women especially walk around with wounds no one asks about. Wounds we stop acknowledging because pretending we're fine is easier than admitting we're not. But I was learning, finally, that silence doesn't protect us. It isolates us. So I kept writing. I wrote letters I never sent to Arthur, to young Jack, to my mother. I wrote lists of things I regretted and things I was proud of. I wrote the cinnamon roll recipe in its entirety, with a note for Claire at the bottom. Add love. Generously. One Saturday morning, I received another call from Jack. Hey, Mom, he said, his voice calm warm. You doing anything next month? I might be going to Paris, I joked, but only if Doris gets her passport renewed. He chuckled. Claire and I were wondering, would you want to come stay for a while? You know, when the baby comes. Help out. Be there. I froze. Not because I didn't want to, but because no one had asked me something that big in years. I'd be honored, I said quietly. If you're sure. We're sure. We want our kid to know you. Really know you. I looked out the window. The morning sun had warmed the sill, and the sound of children playing drifted up from the street. I'll start packing now, I said with a grin. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. I dug out a small suitcase, packed it with soft sweaters, sensible shoes, and a jar of my homemade strawberry jam. I labeled old photo albums to bring with me and tucked the journal Claire gave me into a side pocket. Doris made me promise to call once a week. If you go getting all important with that baby and forget about me, I'll haunt you. Noted, I said, hugging her. The day I left, Edna handed me a little crocheted cap. For the baby, she said. And tell your son he better name that child after you. I laughed. I'll suggest it. When I arrived in their city again, this time it felt less foreign. Jack met me at the airport, and when he pulled me into a hug, I realized something had changed. Not just in him, but in me. I was no longer trying to fit into their lives like a guest. I was family, and I carried myself like I belonged. Claire was waiting at home, glowing, her belly now prominent. You made it, she said, holding me longer than expected. I told you I would. They showed me the nursery painted a soft sage green, with a rocking chair by the window and tiny shelves filled with picture books. I want to put your stories in here, Claire said, brushing a hand along the shelves. You haven't read them yet. I don't have to, she said. They're from you. That's enough. We spent the next few days baking, walking, preparing. At night, I read aloud from old fairy tales, practicing for the child that would soon arrive. Jack painted stars on the ceiling of the nursery. Claire arranged baby clothes by size and color. Every day, they asked my opinion. Every day, I gave it. I wasn't a bystander anymore. I was part of the fabric. One night, Claire couldn't sleep. She came to my room quietly and asked if I'd talk. We sat together in the dim light. I'm scared, she confessed. You're allowed to be. I don't know how to be a mother. I reached over and took her hand. Neither did I. No one does. But love covers a multitude of clumsy moments. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Thank you for giving Jack the kind of love that still echoes. My eyes filled. Thank you for giving me a chance to echo it again. Claire went into labor just after midnight, 5 days earlier than expected. Jack's voice echoed down the hallway, tight with panic and excitement all at once. Mom. Her water broke. I was up in an instant, my robe half on, adrenaline pushing back sleep. At the hospital, time slowed. Nurses moved quickly, but the world felt underwater. Claire clutched Jack's hand, sweat beading on her forehead. She looked at me once as they wheeled her into the delivery room. Don't leave, she whispered. I won't, I promised. Hours passed. I waited in that small, sterile lounge, the kind with linoleum floors and tired magazines. I prayed quietly not just for Claire and the baby, but for strength. To be present. To be steady. I wasn't sure how long I sat like that. The sky turned from night to gray morning. Then Jack appeared in the doorway, his eyes glassy, his mouth trying to form words. She did it, he breathed. She's okay. They're both okay. A laugh escaped me. Or a sob. It was hard to tell. He took my hand and pulled me down the hall. Claire lay in bed, glowing and pale, a small bundle in her arms. Come meet your granddaughter, she said. I stepped closer. My breath caught. She was tired-faced, wiggling, with a soft tuft of hair and hands curled into fists like she was already holding on tight to this world. Jack whispered, We named her Elise. I looked up. After my mother? Claire nodded. It felt right. My knees nearly gave. Jack caught me before I could sink. In that moment, I thought about all the women who had come before me. My mother, Claire's mother, all the quiet sacrifices, all the unsaid words. And now, this tiny new being, wrapped in possibility and lineage and love. I held her. and she fit perfectly in my arms. When we returned home from the hospital, the house felt transformed. Not just by the baby things now scattered in every room, but by the energy, the hope. Jack was softer, Claire stronger, and I was finally full in ways I hadn't imagined possible. I rocked Elise every morning, telling her stories of her grandfather, of her father's childhood, of the time I once drove 3 hours just to hear Jack play a single note in a school band concert. She listened with wide eyes or slept through them, a soft snore escaping her button nose. One night, a week after they brought Elise home, I stood in the nursery alone. The stars Jack had painted on the ceiling glowed faintly. Claire stepped in quietly behind me. "I'm afraid sometimes," she admitted. "Of what?" "Of messing her up." I turned and smiled. "You will." She blinked. "And you'll love her enough to fix it," I added. Claire exhaled slowly. "How do you do that?" "Say exactly what I need." I touched her arm. "Because I remember being you. And because I had to learn the hard way that being a good mother isn't about never failing. It's about returning. Again and again." She hugged me then, long wordless. The next day, Jack surprised me with a small gift bag. Inside was a delicate gold locket. Engraved inside were the words, "To the woman who came back, when we didn't even know we needed her." Tears blurred my vision. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "Don't say anything," Jack said. "Just stay." Weeks passed. I extended my visit again. And then again. The idea of going home felt strange now. My apartment felt more like a postcard version of a life that once was. But here was breath and laughter and a newborn heartbeat. Still, I knew I couldn't stay forever. One quiet afternoon, as Elise napped and Claire grocery shopped, Jack sat with me on the porch. "I think you've saved us," he said suddenly. I raised a brow. "I brought cookies and some stories." "That's hardly a rescue mission." He smiled. "No, you reminded us what it means to be present, to listen, to look at people like they matter." I looked out at the garden. A hummingbird hovered near the rosemary. "We all forget," I said. "We think love is this loud, dramatic thing. But it's quieter than that. It's in the return, the noticing." He nodded. "I'm sorry for all the years I didn't notice." "I forgive you." And I did. The day I finally packed to leave, I stood in Elise's nursery one last time. I left the journal on the shelf with a note. For Elise. To be opened when you need to remember who you are and where you came from. Inside the journal, I'd written entries for her. A letter for her first heartbreak, her first day of school, her wedding day, her first baby. All the moments I might not see but still wanted to be part of. As I zipped my suitcase, Claire touched my arm. "You'll come back?" "Only if I'm invited," I teased. She pulled me into a hug. "You're always invited." At the airport, Jack walked me to the gate. "Promise me something," he said. "Anything. Keep writing. Your stories. They're more than stories." I smiled. "They're maps." He nodded. "Exactly." I boarded the plane with a full heart and a locket resting near it. Back in my apartment, Doris was waiting with tea and too many questions. We sat on my balcony and watched the sun set over the neighborhood like it always had, but somehow gentler now. "You know," she said, "you're different." "How so?" "You glow a little." I laughed. "That's just the baby spit up still on my sweater." She rolled her eyes. "No, it's joy. Don't get used to it. It's annoying." We both laughed. Later that night, I stood in my kitchen, the same place I had unboxed those broken cookies months ago, and pulled out a new package. This one, I baked myself. Cinnamon raisin, just like Claire made. I wrapped them carefully, added a note. "For Lillian. Because women like us deserve to be fed with more than crumbs." The next morning, I walked down to the mailbox, slid the box in, and smiled as it disappeared. I knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. Babies grow. People forget again. Life pulls and tugs in unexpected ways. But now, I knew how to show up. Not just for others, but for myself. And as I stood there under a wide blue sky, a breeze lifting my silver hair, I realized something simple and sacred. A single act of honesty, one box of unwanted cookies, had restored a bridge, a sun, a friendship, and a purpose. Sometimes, all it takes to rewrite your place in the world is daring to say, "I deserve more." And sometimes, the universe dares to answer, "Yes, you do."